Greetings, my name is Dr. Falami DeVoe, and you are listening to And the Conversation Continues podcast. This podcast invites you, the listener, to engage in the enlightening and inspiring topics that were featured at Antioch University's Masters of Arts in Individualized Studies Colloquia. 3 times a year, faculty, staff, students, and community gather together virtually to center social justice issues with lived experiences. From learning how to lead and live during COVID-19 to unpacking environmental justice as a human right or centering mental well-being, thought leaders, scholars, and activists shared with the Colloquia community a plethora of ideas and perspectives to consider. Well, this left a desire for more conversation, so here we are, and the conversation continues. This podcast seeks to dive deeper into the rich conversations and stories that were shared during those times. And on today's show, we are continuing the conversation from the Spring 2020 Colloquium, Living and Leading with Purpose, Meaning and Intentionality During the COVID-19 Pandemic. May 2020, the world was in the thrust of a global lockdown as the coronavirus surged. And the focus of this colloquium was to provide our community with practical strategies and insight on the way in which to continue to forge on during this unprecedented event. And I had the lovely opportunity to have one of my presenters, Dr. Atim George. She is joining me today. And I'm excited because I affectionately call her my sister. And I have my sister on the podcast today. And the information that she shared during her presentation, and her presentation was entitled, "What is Your Story? What is Your Vision? Mysticism and Pragmatism, an Eclectic Approach to Overcoming During a 21st Century Pandemic." And you know what? It is still relevant. The message is still relevant and worthy of revisiting as we are still maneuvering this pandemic. But before we get into talking with my sister, let me share how dynamic and just how much experience and expertise that she brings to this podcast today. Dr. Atim George is a 2020 graduate of Antioch University School of Leadership and Change. Atim describes herself as a global citizen, profoundly committed to peace and social justice. Her art and scholarship reflect her vision, values, and commitment to harmonious, sustainable living on Earth. A U.S. diplomat for 30 years, Atim served in Africa and Latin America. Her diplomatic practice included work on complex international challenges such as the climate crisis, HIV and AIDS, immigration, human rights, and democratization. She is a fellow of the Salzburg Global Seminar, and in 2006, she received the chieftaincy title of Yeye Araba from the late Une of Ile-Ife, Nigeria. Atim loves to travel, dance, and study world mythology. And I would say, and I'm going to say this on a personal note, Atim loves to connect with her people. Atim is about making connections and having sustainable, meaningful relationships, and I love her for that. And her dissertation, which is amazing, was entitled Generative Leadership and the Trailblazing Life of Aurelia Erskine Brazil, an African-American female Foreign Service officer. So now, I am so happy to introduce to you as we have this conversation with Dr. Atim George, my sister. Welcome to And the Conversation Continues.
Thank you so much, Falami. It is indeed my pleasure to be in your presence.
Well, thank you so much. Can you believe we are still here. Last year when you spoke at the colloquium, we were just 2 months into this situation, and we're still in it. We're seeing these variants, and what is the message today? But I want you just to give me your insight, your thoughts about how you came up with this topic. We're here today still. Just let's just have this conversation.
Thank you so much. When you gave me the theme of living and leading with purpose, meaning, and intentionality during the COVID-19 pandemic, I just went inside and let spirit guide. And what I said then is true now. I quoted a woman by the name of Christy Carbonelli of the American Friends Service Committee, who said right now the COVID-19 pandemic is magnifying injustices and many people are hurting.
Let's
That
stop.
was true then,
Yes, let's stop right there because you said that was then, and this is now, right?
and it is true now.
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
that was my point of departure in my presentation.
it
And
is.
what I challenged people then to consider, I want them to consider it even now, that as we're living during a time where we're facing these magnified injustices, it is incumbent upon those of us of goodwill to fashion approaches and practices that address, mitigate, and eliminate suffering, but also demonstrate our non negotiable commitment to peace and social justice.
That's right. That right there, Dr. George, let me tell you, that is so quotable. I mean, that says so much. That's a word, as as folks would say that are in the church. Now, that's a word because it is very incumbent upon us to look at ways to eliminate the suffering. We see the despairing differences, right, in the ways in which people are addressing health concerns, right, during this time. So it is a very trying times that we're dealing with, and your message, like I said, and that's why I'm glad that we're talking again, because, and this, again, as you heard in the beginning, and the conversation continues, you had just a 45 minutes of time, and you landed so much information. You gave us so much information that I said, no, we need to come back and to dissect this even more. And here we are again. So, yes.
Well,
Good.
my operating premise was that our work together was about leading change. And if there's one thing I learned from my graduate program was that leading change is messy. And
Absolutely.
then I also learned that when you are coping with both internal and external change, you're in the midst of what Karp and Helgo call chaotic change. And so I said that I wanted to draw on my very rich African and Native American cultural heritage and traditions to emphasize both inclusion and broad based consultation. And that broad based consultation also involved convening the ancestors, and that these traditions employ story and narrative engagement as a way of leading change.
Bringing
And so
stories,
one of
right?
the stories are integral. In fact, my doctoral research led me to the conclusion that stories are the ancient and powerful tool that our ancestors formed. They're a pedagogical tool, they're a leadership tool, they're a communication tool, they're medicine. As my grandmother would say, they're good for what ails you.
I love that.
And so what I did was I challenged those who came to the colloquium with two basic questions, because it took me back to my study of metaphysics. And my metaphysics teacher, Ed Rabel, a Canadian mystic, said to me, Atim, you should always have an inventory of unanswered questions. And I take that to mean you should be a lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put two questions to the people who were convened with us. What is your vision? What is your story? So hopefully I added that to their inventory. And then we took a journey together to unpack the vision and the story. And so I gave them a number of symbols. The first one was delta, and it represents the concept of change in mathematics, as we talked about leading change. I talked about Weiji, the ancient Chinese symbol for crisis,
Mm-hmm.
which includes both danger and opportunity. From there, I introduced the ancient Southern African philosophical construct of Ubuntu.
Mm-hmm.
I am because we are. We are because I am.
Mm-hmm.
And then on to Sankofa from West Africa, which says, go back and get it. There is value in hindsight. And this was very important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I introduced the concept of Buddhism and a symbol for Buddhism, because from that ancient tradition, I learned that the breath is our only possession.
Yeah.
We embrace it as we come into this embodiment, and we release it and surrender it as we leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, I shared the symbol that I developed as I moved into my responsibilities as a chief. And I challenged people to consider developing their own personal symbol. My symbol shows a question mark moving like a spiral punctuated by the calorie. And the idea is to question authority. It's healthy in a democracy.
Mm. Please tell me, what is the importance of one developing their personal symbol? And
Well, in my case, for example, I knew that the spiral, the coil, which is present in abundance in my natural hair, is an energy generator. So when I'm beginning to do work, I create a mind map because I'm a visual learner, and that curl, that question mark unfolding promotes the energy that I need to define and complete tasks.
mm,
And the calorie is a quintessential feminine symbol. And so that was the power that this symbolic language gave to me to do my work. And so I thought that others might want to develop their own power symbol.
mm,
I put it on
yes,
my business cards. I center it when I'm writing notes, preparing presentations, and the like.
I love that. I remember actually uh, creating my own kind of symbol as you asked us to do that, and just wanted to hear from you. I mean, particularly with symbols that mean so much, because just like symbols mean a lot to um, for a person, affirmations are big for me as well, and they help to
Mm-hmm.
really ground me. And so I think of this power symbol as a grounding for a person as they are traversing difficult challenges, right? So I just thought of that as you're talking about that, and you talked about this visual learner and creating this mind map as you walked right through there. What are you three important elements of your mind map that you wanted to elucidate for the participants, those who were participating that day in the colloquium?
Well, With a mind map, you change the orientation of the paper. And so you've got horizontal orientation. So it's just flipping the script a little bit.
Mm.
Let's just change our frame a bit. And then you're invited to use both color and image to associate concepts that you want to present either in writing or speaking. And I knew that I wanted to present those symbols that we discussed, and I wanted to use those symbols to help make sense of the pandemic. And I focused on this whole notion that this is a highly contagious respiratory dis-ease. And I said that it constituted a global wake up call, especially for our species, humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not to exclude other sentient beings. But what I wanted to do was to present the key concepts that I trusted would stimulate not only our thinking, but our practice as we move forward in dealing with the pandemic. As the colloquium's theme said, living and leading with meaning and intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And those are important tools. So, what I shared with the group that day was my own journey as a scholar and how my scholarship is rooted in a profound respect for epistemological diversity, that there are many ways of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I tapped into Ubuntu and Sankofa and the breath and Weiji and crisis, I came to realize the importance of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I drew on the work of David Anderson Hooker. He and one of his collaborators said that narrative is a universally accessible technology that bestows no advantage to any one group. All of us have access to story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can remember listening to beloved Toni Morrison.
Mm.
And I, again and again, I listened to this particular interview where she said, I stood at the border, I stood at the edge, and I claimed it as central. And I let the rest of the world move over to where I was. And I think that's what we of goodwill who want to invite change, systemic, transformational change that eradicates the injustice and the suffering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways you do that is through story. Of course, Dr. Toni Morrison taught us that.
That's right. That's right.
Also, another one of the people that I honor who is not yet an ancestor is Clarissa Pinkola Estes,
Yes,
a
yes,
Jungian analyst. And she's
yes.
the author of Women Who Run with the
Mm-hmm.
Wolves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the books I cannot keep in my library because I keep sharing it with people.
It's
She's
worth
the
sharing.
one, oh yes,
Mm-hmm.
she's the one who essentially talked about story as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I shared some stories that anchor my life and practice. I talked about BAT. I could tell the story if you'd like me to.
Absolutely. And I also want to say I love Clarissa Pinkola Estes. I use are you familiar with her saying about ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching
Mm-mm.
out. Oh yes, I'm going to read this really quickly, and then
Please
you can
do.
talk about the story, because this just talks about how, well, let me just read it. Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip toward an enduring good. What is needed for dramatic change is an accumulation of acts, adding to, adding more, continuing. We know that it does not take everyone on earth to bring justice and peace, but only a small, determined group who will not give up during the first, second, or 100th gale. One of the most calming and powerful actions you can do to intervene in a stormy world is to stand up and show your soul. Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times. The light of the soul throws sparks, can send up flares, build signal fires, causes proper matters to catch fire. To display the lantern of soul in shadowy times like these, to be fierce and to show mercy toward others. Both are acts of immense bravery and greatest necessity. Struggling souls catch light from other souls who are fully lit and willing to show it. If you would help to calm the tumult, this is one of the strongest things you can do. I love this. I use this in one of my classes, particularly it's the one class where talking about service and community engaging. What are you doing? And it kind of it goes again to the purpose. What is your purpose? What is your vision? That's what speaks to me when I hear this particular piece from her. But I'm glad you brought her up.
That and the ability to stand
Stand,
and
absolutely.
allow your light to shine.
Absolutely. In the
That's
storm.
powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it reminds me of beloved Fannie Lou Hamer.
Mm-hmm.
One
Mm-hmm.
of her favorite songs was This Little Light of Mine.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's
I'm going
right.
to let it shine.
That's right.
How many of us were nurtured on that kind of courage?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us your story. You said you did share some wonderful stories. You are a masterful storyteller. I love it. I remember sitting in our classes. Full disclosure, we were in the same program together, and remember you telling stories. And I think you even said that you went to a training workshop, a storytelling workshop. So you're very skilled, and it's just a part of your nature. So please share your stories.
Well, this story was one of the stories given to me by my beloved husband, and it's about Bat. You see, Bat was lonely, and so she decided to visit folks and make new friends. She flew up into the sky world to visit the birds. But when they saw her frame, they said, "Oh no, she's not like us." And they shunned her. But undaunted, Bat decided to visit the earth plane to make friends among the mammals. But when they saw her wings, they immediately concluded she's not part of us. Look at those wings. And like the birds, the mammals rejected Bat. Fortified by her experience, Bat decided to look within. As a consequence of self reflection, Bat decided to make friends with herself. Bat discovered her unique beauty, strength, power, and versatility. Indeed, Bat became nature's first recognized hybrid. And that is how the story goes.
I love
Hey,
it.
ho. And the reason that I offered the parable of the bat was I felt like Bat, unrecognized, misunderstood. But like Bat, my experiences helped me to recognize my strengths as a partner, as a parent, as a researcher, as a global citizen. And clearly, the hybrid suggests a level of complexity that serves as an excellent point of reference as we continue our explorations, living and leading with purpose, meaning, and intentionality during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I turn next to the story of Baboon. You see, all of the animals got together for a party and they had a wonderful time. They danced, they sang, they ate the most delicious food. Toward the end of the feast, Lion said, "The ugly one is going to wash the dishes." Immediately, Baboon jumped up and protested, "I ain't busted nobody's suds." That's a colloquial term for washing dishes.
Mm-hmm.
In unison, all of the animals exclaimed, "Look at Baboon, eh? Who called your name?" Now, I've taken the liberty of injecting vernacular language from African American culture to augment the tale that has its origins in Liberia, West Africa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The moral of the story is a guilty conscience needs no accuser. Lion didn't say Baboon will wash the dishes. He said the ugly one will wash the dishes. But Baboon's low self esteem caused him to protest.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question is, as you address the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, have you looked within? Do you recognize your own worth and inherent dignity? And if not, why not? And why not now?
Right. That's so.
And then I oh,
Let me
excuse me, go
no
ahead.
no no words. I just hearing that because I talk a lot about looking within and taking time to process and I was having a conversation the other day with someone and she's like that's hard. We don't want to look within, and so when you're dealing because when you're dealing with trauma, when you're dealing with very difficult issues, it's very challenging to pull that out and say, yes, I'm going to sit down and to look within. So how do you really get people to understand how important this is in an effort to move forward?
Well, let's think back to Bat.
Mm-hmm.
You remember how Bat went first to the skyward world, she was rejected.
Mm-hmm.
Then she turned to the earth plane, she was rejected. So she dealt with some uncomfortable truths, and they were the ones that sent her to into self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Baboon, his self-esteem was so low. And in this case, his community was the one that urged him on to self reflection because he immediately assigned the task to himself. And his community asked him to really consider who called your name. You're actually the one who considered yourself ugly. And so this is the concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are because I am. The work is both individual and collective.
Mm-hmm.
And story is one path, dance is another path, music is another path into this opportunity to reflect on your lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much rich material there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, you there's so much. I believe you have a story about a turtle, don't you? I think you talked about a turtles,
Yes,
right?
yes,
I
I
want
do.
you.
In fact, my beloved husband Z had shared the turtle story. It's
Yes.
drawn from his maternal family story tradition. Um, long ago, a group of fierce adversaries attacked our village, and we
Mm-hmm.
were forced to flee with only the clothes on our backs. As my ancestors sought shelter in the forest, a turtle directed them to a cave. In hot pursuit, the adversaries tracked us to the mouth of the cave, and seeing our footprints leading into the cave, they prepared their deadly assault. But miraculously, when they began to enter the caves to pull out the inhabitants, all they encountered were turtles, turtles, and more turtles. So to this day, we protect turtle because turtle protected us.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the concept of Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing we're all connected. And this is part of the lesson that COVID-19 is here to teach us. The story has application today because it suggests that we're under pressure. There are resources, and sometimes remarkable, miraculous resources waiting to provide aid and assistance. As a species, we emerge from the earth and we are composed of carbon. And when exposed to high levels of pressure over very long periods of time, carbon is transformed from the mundane, the prosaic lump of coal into the multifaceted diamond with aesthetic qualities of both strength and beauty. So
Yes.
I take it a step further and I say Mother Nature is conspiring to provide for us. And in turn, we must protect her. So the story of the villagers choosing life as a priority, right? There was no record that they grabbed their favorite blanket or cooking pot. They fled with the clothes on their backs to save their lives. And then to add value, essentially, they focused on protecting that which protect them. I can remember when I shared this story with my sister Doris, who is a devout Christian, her reaction was, hallelujah. They were transformed into the image of their Savior.
Yes, we were there. We were so just enthralled with the hallelujah, and there was this dramatic pause. I love it. I
Well,
love it.
I could go on and say what the ancestors encountered in that experience. My guess is there were people who were slavers, and they
Yes,
sought to enslave
slaved. Yes,
our
yes.
ancestors, and that is what Mesra would call a disorienting dilemma
Dilemma.
and an opportunity for transformative learning, a paradigm shifting experience,
Yes.
as is the COVID
COVID
19
19. Absolutely.
pandemic.
Absolutely. We
So I
can we.
think,
I'm sorry. I'm just excited about all that you're continuing to bring to this conversation, and I do want to have time to talk a little bit about something that you wrote that is very close to your heart and very meaningful, not only for you, but for others. And so I wanted to take just a few moments before we ended our conversation. And again, we will have to have more conversation about this for sure. Your lessons that you're teaching us, and I appreciate the ways in which you interweave the stories, the parables, the messages, the symbols, all of that, to make it to really concretize the message. For those of us who are living and leading in during this time, this very challenging time. And what I love most, again, is going inward and to seeing the message, and then the connection to also just the earth and what Mother Earth is trying to give us. What message can we gain from Mother Earth? So I want you just to talk a little bit about respect. And I remember that title very clearly. And you can say it's not the title from Aretha Franklin, whose documentary just came out a couple weeks ago, or a movie just came out, but it is the title of your article, I believe, Respect, Making Your Message, What I Learned About Courageous Truth Telling from Gender-Based Violence. Is that correct?
yes, I have submitted it to a group at the University of Mauritius who is editing a book on gender based violence. And so this was essentially the substance of my postdoctoral research. I just completed a year at UCSB's Center for Black Studies Research. And this notion of making your message came from Robin Roberts. And it encouraged me to share my vulnerabilities and to research the difficult but important topics of my mother's mental health challenges and suspicious death. And with your permission, I'll just read the abstract
Yes,
of
yes.
the chapter. In November 1967, Dorothy George, a 36-year-old Black woman whose early life had shown great promise, was found injured and near death in a Chicago alley. Despite these suspicious circumstances, the cause of her death weeks later was ruled undetermined, and no criminal investigation was ever undertaken. Dorothy George was my mother, and this research, initiated more than 50 years after these fateful events transpired, represents my efforts to reckon with the forces of racism, misogyny, and mental health challenges that vitiated Dorothy's prospects for a self actualized life of purpose and meaning. Employing oral history, ethnographic resources, and archival sources. In this research, I consider the implications of officials' action and failure to act in my efforts to illuminate critical elements in a painful episode of gender based violence.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I'd like to thank you, Sister Falami, because your work and scholarship helped to inform this work. It
Mm,
was a single subject case study under what I called Black Mothers Matter.
yes,
And
yes.
I drew on your research and your dissertation as I looked at um, womanism and a womanist uh, perspective. And so I included that
Thank
in
you.
my treatment of the topic.
Thank you
It
so much.
served as a focal lens for the study.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much. I am very excited, and I that's why I wanted to have the opportunity to highlight for you to share this work, and so that this can. And did you say when this would be featured, when this would be available? Did you say that?
The fall of this year,
Okay.
2021.
Great. Fall of 21. So that leads me into this next question. Where can people find you if you're on social media, if they want to obtain more information about this article or any of what you shared today? Where can they find you, either social media or wherever you would like to?
Yes, I'm on Facebook,
Okay.
Atim George. I'm on Twitter at Atim George.
Okay. And that's
Correct.
ATIMGEORGE.
That's
Awesome.
it.
Awesome. Well, Sister Dr. Atim, I again adore you, and I am so happy that you were able to share, to reflect, to re-go. We went back. We went back and to tell the story and to give some more insight as to living and leading during this time that we are currently still in. So, thank you so much.
Oh, it's truly an honor and a pleasure. So
Thank you.
thank you for the invitation. It was a wonderful opportunity to reconnect.
Yes, you're welcome. Well, I invite those of you to share this podcast with those in your networks. Follow the IMA program on Instagram at Antioch University IMA. Until next time, this is Dr. Falami DeVoe. Come join me again as the conversation continues.